What's up, guys? This is Mark Denker here from Y Delta, and today we're talking about the 10 reasons to move away from legacy systems. Before we dive in, as always, make sure to grab your free version of our ebook, Software is Feeding the World. Just put in your email, and we'll send you a version in PDF and EPUB that you can download on your Amazon Kindle or any other e reader for that matter. Alright, with that promo out of the way, let's dive in to the 10 reasons to get the heck out of these legacy systems. But before we dive into all these reasons, perhaps we should just define what is a legacy system in the first place. So, in a nutshell, a legacy system is an outdated computer system, application, software, what have you, that is becoming or has become obsolete. In the most extreme cases, these legacy systems are not just difficult to work with, but impossible to use. What has happened in general in the world when IT started to came about around the 50s is that more and more organizations embraced IT and the benefits of building a digital system. So regular big organizations in the 70s and 80s might have embraced as the first ones, the first movers, the IT revolution. Then in the 90s and in the new millennium, you had more and more organizations, more regular organizations building their own IT system to manage their day to day. Then everything started to become connected, the internet became mainstream, we started having computers in our pockets and around our wrists in watches. And now all organizations needs to be digital. Everybody needs a website, everybody needs to process their day to day in a digital environment. But what has happened is that these systems that has been foundational to many organizations really, they are, if not already, they are becoming legacy. Old systems that are hard to work with, hard to use, become less functional, and in some cases impossible to use. So you see it everywhere you go. And it's really, really crushing innovation. A lot of organizations have big ambitions, and then reality strikes hard. A legacy system blocks basically innovation from actually happening, and you see this everywhere. So while there's good intention, legacy systems in particular are really the party pooper for a lot of innovation to happen in the world. So, how and the reasons why do you move away from these legacy systems? How do you manage all this? So, one of the reasons that you should move away is obviously expensive maintenance. Maintenance is a thing in general in IT that is difficult to handle for organizations. The CFO, the CEO, they all cringe when they see money going out of the bank every month for maintaining IT systems. So it is really a necessary evil. But how big is that evil? Well, with legacy systems, it seems to be a huge, huge cost to a lot of organizations. And we bring an example in this article about COBOL that was designed in 1959, sorry, and now processes 70% of the business transactions in the world. 70% of all our commerce is being processed via a system that is built in COBOL. It's pretty insane. So this financial industry is heavily dependent on an old programming language dating back to the 1950s. And these banks, insurance companies, whatever you have in the financial industry, they have big budgets in general and also big IT budgets. And as this article that we link to here says, the financial industry spends 80% of their IT budget on legacy maintenance. That is a huge amount. It's insane, really. And typically, what happens, which this curve or graph tries to explain, is that you might build a system back in the, let's say, 80s. Let's say you're a bank. You build your system in the 80s to process transactions and records and all that stuff for your clients. And in the beginning, the cost was low. you didn't really have much maintenance cost because the system was new, right? So the red curve is down here. And the optimal cost is much higher because basically you have a new system, you don't need to spend too much on maintenance. So there's a gap, there's a positive gap. But then what starts happening over time, especially if you don't maintain your system properly, is that legacy systems tend to cost more and more and more and more to the extreme case, as you can see here. Because complexity gets bigger and bigger, the system grows in complexity, and hence the maintenance cost becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. At the same time, the optimal cost, if you maintain the system properly in time, the optimal cost seems to grow a little bit, but not much, right? And the difference between these two curves is what we call technical debt. So basically, the difference between the optimal cost and the actual cost that you pay. And you see that in so many organizations. You might have big budgets, like the financial industry, but if 80% is being eaten up by maintenance, sure, you might have a $1 billion budget, but if most of it goes to your legacy system and just maintaining it, so day to day can function, then you don't really have that big of a budget anyways. So that really sucks. That's a huge innovation barrier to the financial industry and many other industries. And it's one of the main reasons why you should move away from a legacy system. Number two, poor security. You might have seen this in any of your organizations that you either run or you have a job in. Because legacy systems are old and a lot of organizations don't maintain and deploy security patches in time, their security becomes very, very bad. And you've seen that. For those of you who can remember the WannaCry ransomware attack back in May 2017, it was a worldwide attack on mainly Microsoft Windows operating systems, computers or systems running on Microsoft Windows, typically older installations of Microsoft Windows. And it cost a fortune for so many companies. Just to take an example from here in Denmark, Maersk, AP Møller Maersk, as we call it in Danish, big shipping company. It's responsible for 1/5 of the world's freight, so a huge shipping company, paid $200 million in not WannaCry actually, the NotPetya, the ransomware that followed WannaCry. So you can just imagine if you add all these ransomwares up, WannaCry, Petya, NotPetya, it becomes a substantial amount in the billions of dollars. So pure security is an obvious second for why you need to migrate or move away from legacy systems. Number three, lack of documentation. As you build a system and it grows, the code base gets larger, the features become more and more complex. The documentation seems to oftentimes is lacking. So what we see a lot in White Delta, for example, is that we see IT departments or organizations that build a system that they did maybe 5 years ago. Multiple people have been working on the system. Some of them documented what they did, some of them didn't. And slowly but surely, this lack of documentation compounds. And then 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line, whatever it is, you end up in a situation where there's almost no documentation. And you end up feeling a little bit like these people in the picture, developers looking for documentation in a legacy system, finding nothing, basically. Speaking of developers, number four, lack of developers that are experienced in the legacy system and its programming language. So obviously because these legacy systems are built in old programming languages like COBOL, dating back to the 50s, these people that learned that back then, they are not around anymore. They either retired or is in their graves now. People today, they learn JavaScript and Python and C# and whatnot. You can actually see on build with, you can see sort of the largest frameworks and therefore also technologies PHP is a big one, .NET, powered by C Sharp, Java is a big one. You can see the full list. Again, I'll link to it in the video below. But COBOL is not here, that's for sure. And all these old programming languages that people don't really use anymore, the people that can actually work in these programming languages are very, very hard to find. And that, of course, ties back to number one, where maintenance is becoming more and more expensive. If there's not a big supply of the people that can work in COBOL, for example, or any other programming language that legacy systems are built in, then supply is down, but demand is still high because you still need your operations to run. And that means that the price for the developers, the price for maintenance becomes sky high. So that's a problem. Again, we use COBOL as an example here. The final reason that we'll talk about in this video, and then for those who are interested, they can obviously read on in the article to number 6 and 7 and so forth. Lack of mobile and web compatibility. We could have added watches, glasses, or whatever device that is popular today or whenever you watch this video. But one thing is for sure is that websites and mobile apps and all that is so important to any organization to have. Everybody needs an online presence today. And many legacy systems are really just not built for a website or an app to talk to that system. So that becomes a huge bottleneck for many organizations. They simply can't launch their web shop or website or mobile app or what have you. So that's again a very, very good reason to migrate, and that's actually what we see a lot, because people can't launch a very important mobile app for their organization. They end up rebuilding their entire system. So that's it for now, guys. The top 10 reasons, actually just 5 in this video, but I'll link to the article below. 10 reasons to move away from legacy systems. Again, remember to drop your email and get a free ebook. We won't spam you, we promise. We send on average maybe an email every other week to give you some updates on the latest and greatest within web and mobile. And until then, guys, I will see you for the next one.